Our theme is Home is Where the Heart Is, and our text on trial is Geography of Home, Writings on Where We Live by Akiko Busch. The book is a collection of short essays on different parts of the home that look deeper into the way we use them and what this means. The author Akiko Busch was born in Japan in 1953 and lived in Thailand until the age of 4. Her family then moved to an old shingled farmhouse in New England, USA. Her childhood home was filled with a mixture of Thai temple paintings, Chinese ceramics, Japanese screens, Balinese textiles, and 17th and 18th century English furniture. This melting pot of cultures sparked her interest in design and space making, and in an interview with Metropolis magazine in 2005, she says that the more things get mixed up, the better, whether you're talking about objects or art or people. Busch is married and has twin boys, now in their 20s, who she regularly refers to in her writings. Busch writes for a variety of publications. She is the author of 3 other books: The Uncommon Life of Common Objects, Essays on Design and the Everyday, Patience, Taking Time in an Age of Acceleration, and 9 Ways to Cross a River. She was a contributing editor at Metropolis magazine for 20 years, in which Geography of Home was originally published as a set of essays between 1993 and 1994. Around this time there were many technological advancements, with computers and the internet becoming more readily available to the general public. This filtered into architecture with the development of 3D modeling, making more complex structures possible.
So what are the central themes of the text? Busch focuses on the different rooms and areas in the home and takes the reader on a journey through them. She examines how people have historically used these rooms and the way this has changed and adapted to the demands of the present. Due to the arrival of new technological products into the home, the way in which we think and utilize our rooms has changed over history. Even though this has supposedly made our lives easier, Busch comments on our tendency to hold on to the nostalgic ideas from the past. She believes that in order to have a genuine understanding of what it is that gives power to the places we live, we need to be tuned into not only the sights, sounds, hums, and vibrations of all the electrical appliances that keep it going, but a host of other interior systems, a network of social and cultural currents, those habits, beliefs, and values that also make it function.
The main arguments in the text focus around society's ambivalence towards traditional living in a contemporary world. Busch tackles our obsession with feelings of nostalgia and instinct to hoard, save, and buy old things to give character and meaning, versus the need for everything everywhere all the time, super fast, instant, and disposable. On page 66, she writes that we do all we can to find appliances that will reduce the time and space needed for household tasks. Yet just as soon as we find the right labour-saving device, we look for ways to recover the rituals we have lost. With the help of technology, we shrug off the limitations of the past, but cling to certain stereotypes. Busch uses the example of front doors, often unused in American homes because of back entrances and side doors made easily accessible by the car. But a house without a front door seems absurd because it doesn't fit with our idea of home. What is home? It's an ideal, a state of mind induced by familiarity, comfort, and the things and people we surround ourselves with.
What and why is the theory contained in the text important? The text is all about the theory behind home. It makes you think about your own life and how the places that you've lived in and the way your parents and family do things have influenced your idea of home. How we see home impacts the way we see ourselves and the way we make ourselves at home in new places. It is part of our identity and helps to give us something to aim for, whether we want something more than our childhood home offered, or we aspire to give our children what our parents have given us. For designers, it is important to understand the relationship between spaces, objects, and people. Homemaking is an intensely personal thing, and so we have to be sensitive to people's preferences and styles of living in order to create homes, not just houses.
So what are the supporting and opposing texts? Busch refers to a pattern language by Christopher Alexander to support her argument. However, this text is a manifesto about how architecture should be done en masse and provides patterns for housing for small families, couples, and single inhabitants. Alexander's theory is opposite to what Busch is writing about. However, she uses quotations from the book to argue why her stance is correct and how Alexander has got it wrong. A supporting argument comes from Alan de Botton's The Architecture of Happiness. In this book, de Botton supports Busch's argument and describes how home is not just a physical place, but also a state of mind. On page 107 he writes, "Those places whose outlook matches and legitimates our own, we tend to honour with the term home. And we fill those places with objects of aspiration which reflect our personalities. These objects give us a sense of security, protect us from the outside world, and compensate for our vulnerability." Similar to Busch, de Botton uses an anecdote or personal experience to illustrate how our surroundings can change the way we think and feel.
What has been the influence of the theory on architecture? In the long term, the text has the ability to influence the way architects think about designing the home. It makes the architect question whether the history of the house is the most important thought to keep in mind, or the emergence of the new technology to make our lives easier and more efficient.
How is the text structured? The book first appeared in an earlier form as a 13-part series in Metropolis magazine between March 1993 and May 1994. The individual essays form the main chapters of the book, and acknowledgements, a preface, an introduction, and epilogue have been added to tie the pieces together and give the work a sense of completeness. The chapter titles are the different rooms and spaces found in a typical house. The rooms are classified by their traditional names rather than the range of activities that go on within them. The book takes you on a journey from the more public to private spaces, but each chapter could easily stand alone because the repetitive format means that you can get a good grasp of the theory wherever you begin.
What type of evidence does the author use to substantiate the argument? Busch uses personal anecdotes, surveys, and other writings to substantiate the argument. She often refers to her childhood home, things that her parents did, and life with her sons. This helps the reader feel at ease, as if you know her quite well by the end of the book. This intimate writing style invites you to test the theories by thinking more deeply about your own experience.
What methodology is adopted in the text? Busch uses a similar method for every chapter to build her argument. She often begins with an anecdote and uses a lot of description so you can get a good picture of what it feels like to be in the spaces she talks about. She then gives a brief history of the room being discussed. For example, she takes you through the transformation of the kitchen from a central hearth to a separate room, then a separate building, moving towards a laboratory for cooking, the introduction of technology making it a showcase for gadgets, and more recently the grand interior makeover, turning it into a theatre-like space for the purpose of entertaining. She then brings in other points of view, referring to other writings or opinions of friends, but only to back up the argument and always reaching the same conclusion.
How is the presentation appropriate to the content? The essays were originally published with colour photos. The book has only 3 in black and white. The front cover, a view of a room through an archway on the second page, and the back cover. These are not referred to specifically in the text, and as such, Busch relies heavily on the reader's imagination and knowledge of objects and architectural styles. The book progresses logically through the spaces, and this journey narrative helps to make the chapters flow.
From analysing this text, we've come up with the following questions for essay consideration. How can architects design homes for the masses when home is such a personal concept? Can architects design homes for the diverse culture of today? If we did away with the nostalgia and made houses technologically efficient, could it still feel like home? Is this even possible? People come from pasts which they impose on any space they occupy.
Just know